Now, food supplies us with macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are those nutrients that contain calories, and there are only three of those: fat, carbohydrate, and protein. And while many diets address just this macronutrient issue, they try to tell you eat more fat and more protein and less carbohydrate. Or they tell you eat more carbohydrate and less fat, or more protein. In other words, they try to juggle some precise and correct ratio of fat, carbohydrate, and protein. And they think that that ratio of micronutrients is going to make some positive influence on your health. And I'm suggesting that that's not the main factor that governs whether a diet is healthy or not. We already know that macronutrient excess is a major factor creating disease, and that almost all Americans get too much fat, get too much carbohydrate, and get too much protein. We'd all do better with less fat, less carbohydrate, and less protein. But let me remind you, there's not one precise amount of fat, carbohydrate, or protein that's correct. There could be many different ratios of fat, carbohydrate, and protein that could be excellent and that could be appropriate for a particular person or appropriate for the mass, for most people. And I'm suggesting, as the result of this talk and what you're going to hear today, that appropriate ratio of fat, carbohydrate, and protein so a diet might be 15 or 20% of calories from fat, and that might be a good diet. Or a diet of 40% of calories from fat might be a good diet too. But one thing I am making clear to say today, and that is that a diet of 10% of calories from fat is not a healthy diet, and may in fact be too low and create medical problems and disease in a large segment of the population. And that's what we're going to talk about, that we do need some fat in our diet. So one of the critical messages I teach is that food is not just a source of macronutrients. Micronutrients are critically important. About 80 years ago, scientists discovered vitamins and minerals. They revealed 14 vitamins and 25 minerals that were essential for normal human cell function. And they said, wow, and people said, this is terrific, this is fantastic. We can stop being so sick. We can add vitamin pills. We could sprinkle them on our food. We can add B1 and B6 to Kool-Aid. We could put thiamine and riboflavin and niacin into Cocoa Puffs. Our problems are solved. And lo and behold, that sparked a cancer epidemic never seen before in human history. And we saw cancer rates increase every year for 75 years in a row. It wasn't until 2 years ago that cancer rates went down. And we know because women are smoking less cigarettes and doctors stopped prescribing so much estrogen, actually had its effect to let it go the other way. But can you imagine 75 years in a row cancer rates increasing? And most of you know in the year 1900, only 2% of the population had heart attacks and strokes in America. And today it's 40% heart attacks, 11% strokes, 51% die of heart attacks and strokes. About 18 years ago, we got some additional information, and we learned that it's not just vitamins and minerals, that natural foods also supply us with phytochemicals, and that at this point, there's more than 10,000 of phytochemicals, and the magnitude by volume and by amount of phytochemicals even overwhelms vitamins and minerals, and they're absolutely essential for functioning of the immune system and for the cell's ability to detoxify from metabolic waste products and toxic compounds. And without phytochemicals, just getting vitamins and minerals, we're going to still have a lot of disease. And perhaps, if the vitamins and minerals are not balanced in an appropriate fashion, they could even increase the risk of cancer. Like, for example, people taking vitamin A and beta-carotene and these vitamin E and individual nutritional supplements that have been shown to increase cancer risk rather than decrease it. So we've learned a lot in recent years. So micronutrients are those substances that don't contain calories. And I've suggested that a simple way to remember how to frame the concept of an ideal diet is that we're looking to eat a diet that's higher in micronutrients, that's higher in nutrients and lower in calories. We have to eat less fat, but the fat we eat has to be high nutrient fat. We have to eat less carbohydrate, but the carbohydrate we eat has to be high nutrient carbohydrate. And we have to eat less protein, but the protein we eat has to be high nutrient protein. Got that? So I showed this slide last year, and this is just the micronutrients added up per equal size portion of food to give people a rough structure, just to get an idea of what foods are higher in vitamins and minerals, naturally occurring, and to recognize that the foods that have the highest amount of discovered vitamins and minerals are the same foods that have the highest amount of undiscovered nutrients, like phytochemicals, as well. You guys got that? So clearly, the American diet focuses on these foods that are low in micronutrients. And they try to juggle some correct ratio, but the foods that are high in micronutrients, we hardly even eat. And the foods highest in micronutrients, right? And in each category, the vegetables that are highest in micronutrients are green vegetables and colorful vegetables, like carrots and red peppers. And the fruits that are highest in micronutrients are things like berries and papaya and kiwis and grapefruits, right? And beans in high in nutrients, and nuts that are highest in nutrients are things like sesame seeds and sunflower seeds and flax seeds and walnuts, right? So we're trying to be nutrient seeking. We want to nutrient seek for health. You want to ask yourself, when you're eating food, are you nutrient seeking when you make food choices? Because we're, like Jeff Novick just said, we're not looking to survive. We're looking, if you want to know what's ideal and to protect yourself from onslaughts and from your past bad habits or from stresses in your life or in your past life, we want to have a diet that we want to know what the hallmark of an ideal way of eating would be so we can strive to that to maximize our health. So does this food not only contain the undiscovered nutrients, but does it not contain foods that might undermine our health, like trans fats, acrylamide, salt, or other chemicals and things? But we have to recognize that the American diet is very, very high in fat, and obviously eating excess calories of any type, especially excess fat, causes us to gain weight, and I call it dietary lipoaugmentation, meaning that we can eat in a way to quickly put fat on our waists, and we can augment ourselves so we can make ourselves look fatter very easily by eating the diet most Americans eat. Almost all the fats in the American diet come from animal fats, trans fats, and refined oils. So in other words, when I'm saying Americans are eating 40% of calories from fat, we're saying that 40% is totally made up of animal fats, trans fats, and refined oils. So when we look at in scientific studies on the relationship between fat intake and disease, you're not really studying the relationship between fat intake and disease. You're studying the relationship between those types of fats and disease, because less than 5% of fat intake in America comes from nuts and seeds, what we're calling the healthy fats. Studying the dangers of fats, a fat in a diet in medical studies, doesn't look at nuts and seed consumption. They look at those low-nutrient, dangerous fats. Did you follow that? So we can look at studies on various fats, and we could see that, number one, something to keep in mind, is that when you substitute olive oil for butter or margarine, we see some benefits. But when we look at the addition, we look at studies that look at the addition of olive oil to a diet over no oil, we find that it actually increases heart attack rate, and increases LDL, or the bad cholesterol. So it's not that olive oil has any beneficial effects on the heart, it's just that it's not as bad as some other fats might have been replaced with.